Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
It has been our pleasure so far, and it continues to be. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, first about Fading Gigolo, and then hopefully about other parts of your wonderful career, and then we'll take a few from the audience.
Sure.
I'm going to start off with basic questions. I gather that Fading Gigolo was originally a sketch.
It was just an idea. It was just, it really came from an idea that I thought, you know, I've always been a fan of Woody's, and I know he likes me, and we've never really done anything of consequence together, a couple little things.
Well, you had been in Hannah and Her Sisters.
Yeah, and he had asked me to be in another movie, which I wasn't available, and once I was up for a big role, and I didn't get it, but I knew he liked my work, and I did a little movie, Company Man, that Doug McGrath did, and we share the same hair cutter. You know, he also thought, why don't you guys work together? And then one day I thought, wow, maybe it would be an interesting team, him and I together. And I just couldn't figure out, you know, exactly in what business. And then a friend of mine, who I think he's in the audience, Herb White's, he has a bookstore, and he was going out of business. And I thought, wow, there's so many stores going out of business and places going out of business. What if we reinvented ourselves in the sex business? And I like films about the sex business, so I have to be honest. Since I've been a little kid, I remember seeing, I think, a Frank Capra film with Barbara Stanwyck. I think it's like a movie from 1931 or something.
A Miracle Woman?
Yeah, something like that.
I just saw that one 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, and almost every actress, and when you think about it, you know, a few guys, but mostly actresses, have made their careers sometimes playing, you know, hookers, either a hooker or a nun. So I was thinking about the nun angle also, and I thought, well, if you're gonna have a movie with sex, you should have a, you know, should also have religion, and I couldn't decide which religion. And then, anyway, Woody liked the idea, and then our hair cutter Anthony introduced us to each other, you know, Woody said to me, so we share a barber, you know, that was the first thing. And I was like, and I said, yes. And he goes, so, you know, tell me the story. And then I told him a few things, and he said, funny. And he said, not funny. Could be. And then he said, well, why don't you write it, and I'll give you my feedback. And I didn't know what that meant. So the first was very broad. It was all over the place. And his feedback was, you know, merciless. So, but, you know, I just kept coming back and doing different drafts. And then in the middle of it, I think he was enjoying, you know, that I wasn't afraid to come back. And I started doing research about that life. And then I picked a Hasidic community, and I did a lot of research and found this organization where lots of people had left. And they would gather to, you know, to have their own community. And Woody encouraged me because he saw the beginning of that character. He said, I think that's a really interesting character. I don't know that much about it. Have you ever read Isaac Bashevis Singer? I said, yes, I'll read some more. But I did a lot of research, and I have some friends who introduced me to people. And then we did these plays together in the middle, on Broadway, relatively speaking, that he asked me to direct, 3-1-X, by him, Ethan Cohen, and Elaine May. And then I got to know him. And I thought, well, that's going to help if we ever act together, that we actually, because I thought the possibility was there that we could have good chemistry together. And I think what you see in the film is a little bit under imaginary circumstances of our relationship and how we kind of deal with each other. And there is like an affection there. And so, you know, that helps when you have a little chemistry. You can't really buy that, you know. And so that's how it developed.
And I know that the screenplay is yours, you directed it, you starred it, but there were, especially in the scenes between the two of you, moments where I felt like Woody Allen was improvising.
He improvised a little bit. He always improvises in his own movies. He stayed to the script pretty, you know, 85%, or, you know, and sometimes, you know, if he had a one-liner in some situation, I would say, hey, you want to try different things, go right and be my guest. But I wrote it for Woody. And the only film I looked at, again, was Broadway Danny Rose. And he always kind of liked the way I was writing it. And then, of course, he made some, you know, excellent additions, you know, to it. But I was trying to write it with his voice in mind, and that he never had a problem with. He seemed to like that, but he definitely likes to massage things, and sometimes you don't know when to come in. You have to figure that out, you know. But he's actually a wonderful performer and vastly underrated as an actor, because he can really hold the screen. A lot of comic actors, they really can't hold the screen, and Woody, you know, he has a gravitas.
A point of clarification, because I watched it twice, but I'm still not 100% sure. The African-American woman...
That's his girlfriend.
That's his girlfriend, but the children are not his.
That's not his. No, those are his stepkids.
Just double checking.
No. Even though the kid looks like him with the glasses.
Exactly.
You know,
that was my next question.
Dante is, see, they didn't know who he was. So they just thought he was this old guy, you know, and they were really tough on him. And he really liked that. They were like fighting all the time, showed him how to play baseball, but they were like, do you know rap music? Do you know this? And he's like, no, I don't know. And I let them improvise sometimes. They had some really interesting interchanges, but he really got along with them. And one of the kids would always step on his foot when he forgot a line. All the time. And I have many takes of Woody going like, what are you doing? You're stepping on my foot. And the kid's like, you didn't say fascism, And he's like, oh yeah, and it's, so, they were really free with him. And I think that helps people because people aren't afraid of you. And you're being treated like a regular person. And he enjoyed that.
Yeah. That line, actually, I thought that was one of the best lines in the film when he insists that during the baseball game, the 6 black kids and the 6 Jewish kids have to have mixed teams because otherwise that's how fascism happens. Yeah. And it felt like it was just improvised on the spot.
But I think it was that's how fascism begins, but he used the word toe hold because he kept stepping on his toe. And that's why he's so fast. Most actors, when they improvise, it takes them 5 minutes to come up with something interesting. He can come up with it, You give him a line about dietary laws or something like that, and then I told him, I said, if you want to, embroider on that, go right ahead. And he'd come up with like 5 different great things, and then we would have to decide, what was what. But most of the time, he stuck pretty closely to the script, sometimes adding in a different phrase, like the Mick Jagger lines were all there, and I kept telling him, you remember when he opens his mouth, it's a horror. It's not horrible. Sometimes he would say it's horrible when he sings. I said no, it's when he opens his mouth. So I had to get over my shyness to tell Woody. Sometimes I think it's better if you say that, and he's like, okay, and he would just do it.
Also, the soundtrack of this film I love, and from the beginning, clarinet to "Sway with Me" when Abigail first leaves Brooklyn. Was that a little bit inspired by Woody Allen's own films?
No, I mean, the saxophonist is Gene Ammons. I grew up with that album. It's called Boss Tenor, and Canadian Sunset is the first track. And I wrote a lot of the script to that album, and also an album of songs by she was, I guess, from Egypt, but she was Italian. Her name was Dalida, and she sang in 5 different languages. She was very famous, but mostly in French. And I bought that CD on the street in Paris for €5 because I knew some of the Neapolitan songs that were on it. But I chose one song, La Volotera, which is actually in a Charlie Chaplin movie, I think City Lights. And the other song I chose was Le Torrent, which I didn't know what it was about until I listened to it about 100 times. And it's actually about a woman's independence. And that's the song I play when Vanessa is walking on the street. But I played that music on the street while we were filming. For Vanessa, for other, when we were doing certain shots, and so it was in the DNA of the film already. And the song she sings at the end is a Neapolitan song, "Tu sei una cosa grande," which means "you are a great thing for me." And Vanessa learned it in Neapolitan, and that's her singing that.
Now, I'm going to stop for a second because it took me a while watching the film the first time to even realize who is this Vanessa. Vanessa Paradis, who plays Abigail, is actually very famous in France as a singer, model, actress, and the partner of Johnny Depp for many years. And I thought when watching this film that it is the most audacious casting I could have thought of to get that French sexpot to play a completely plausible, quiet, repressed woman. How did that casting come about?
I have to credit my agent, Christina Bazdikas, who's a tough Greek lady, and she made me see her film Heartbreakers, and then I watched an old film of her. It's called The Girl on the Bridge,
Yeah.
and I met Vanessa, and I really got along with her, and it was for another project. And when this project came up, she said, I was thinking of a few other different women. You know, one person wasn't available. She said, why don't you think about Vanessa? And I was resistant at first. And but she said, you know, there's lots of people in that community who look, there's a variety of looks from a variety of, I mean, obviously it's always from Eastern Europe, you know, where the original Hasidim are from. So, but there are some people from France too. And then I started looking at her, and I said, well, let her read it. And we talked about it. And she came to Williamsburg. She met all these people. I think what she does is she is a unique person. She's like, you know, when Fellini had Giulietta Massina, you know, she's small, she's very fragile, she's delicate, but she has this innate sense of privacy and grace, which you just can't act at all. And matter of fact, the girl who we based a lot of things on looked very much like her, a little bit younger than her, but she didn't have any kids. And I think, you know, she just brought, she's a very empathetic person, a wonderful person, and I think she did a beautiful job.
No, I agree, and I have to admit, when I introduced the film, I even said that while it's often very funny, it's also a really touching film because the entire relationship between Avigal and your character, it has a gravitas that sort of counterpoints the more comical Murray moments and makes this a lot deeper and richer than I think it might have been.
Well, I think, you know, Woody encouraged me. He said, you know, we could start it with this crazy idea, but if it develops, just like people have a crazy idea in life, and then all of a sudden it develops, and then you go into something, and then you realize, oh, things are going well, and then boom, there's human ramifications that happen, and it's not just cavalier type of a situation that you're in anymore. That actually could evolve into something, and many times there are certain kinds of maybe more European films that evolve that way that I like, that you don't see it coming, and I just think she deepened it because of what she brought to it. But it's like a love story. You know, sometimes people meet someone at the right time and the wrong time, and they can't be together. But, you know, she also knows there's this other man who cares for her, but he doesn't know how to really speak to a woman because he's grown up all, you know, with men. So she's never, ever been courted, you know, because most of the time it's arranged marriage and you're given, and that's how it is. And so I thought that was something interesting to explore, and also to have, you know, women of a certain age being in situations that were brand new. So all of a sudden you're in a situation that you would normally be in when you were 17 or 18. But, you know, people, this happens in life. People are together, they lose people, they get divorced, someone dies, and all of a sudden, whether you're a prostitute or a massage therapist or whatever, you're on a first date. And how do you go about that again? And I thought that was something that could be potent to explore. And it interests me as a person, and then I try to put it into the movie.
Well, in addition to the very smart casting of Vanessa Paradis, could you tell us a little about casting the others, like Sharon Stone? Was that, you know, how did that come about?
Well, you know, originally, you know, I wanted women who are like even, you know, a little bit older, you know, and of course the financiers don't like that, you know. My original idea was like really, you know, pushing it, you know, and everyone was like trying to bring me back. But I thought it's just interesting for someone like Sharon. I said, you know, she could probably play a doctor. She would never have to pay for sex with anyone. I said, but, you know, there are people who say, listen, I want a situation, you know, I have an unhappy marriage. My husband has all these girlfriends. Just this was what was in my mind. And I just want something with no strings attached. I just want to do something, you know. And then she, of course, doesn't really know how to do it, and becomes a little possessive of the guy. But sometimes people have these ideas, And the ideas never turn out, when you actually do something, sometimes it can be a disaster, or sometimes it can be very different than you imagined. And I just think, I spoke to some people in the sex trade. I wasn't trying to go into the dark or sordid side of it, but there were sex workers who I spoke to who felt like, hey, listen, I make people, happy, or I relieve, their grief, or I teach someone something, and someone's really lonely, and sometimes they want to be intimate with me, and there are plenty of people who felt like, okay about what they did, and so I thought, well, let me at least touch on that if I could, and I thought Sharon was actually, it interested me that she's made her living as a sex symbol, and now she can't exactly do that. So she's in a different spot of her life. And sometimes as actresses get better, the roles, of course, they get older, and the roles, of course, get way smaller. And sometimes you're at your peak, you're ready to do something great. And of course, there's a 25-year-old girl or a 30-year-old woman doing it. So that interests me. I don't think life ends at that time. And I also think women don't get an opportunity to do sometimes kind of nuanced roles. So I was trying to be a good listener and develop that, for any of the actresses. And the Selima character that Sofia played, she is kind of not based on a friend of mine sexually, but she's the lady who designs my glasses. And she's this great, free, wild, fun lady. And I thought, that's the kind of person I want as the one woman who's very like, okay, I'll try something one time, 2 times, it doesn't matter. And I also like to be the guy and stuff like that. And I thought, okay, and I thought that was all right, without, implying it. Like the dancing stuff is kind of, it's replacing sometimes the sex scene, And like when we did the dance between me and Sofia, we said no choreography. We just put the music on, see what happens. Because if you're going to check me out and I'm going to check you out, let's see, let's film it. Let's see what happens. And then we just put a track down, and then we did it. So
That worked.
yeah.
Well, when I first saw the film, I thought Sofia Vergara should really be called Sofia Viagra, because you have that shot when you come into the apartment for the first time. The camera is positioned under her legs with the stiletto heels.
Those heels are very high.
And there you are in between her legs in a shot that reminds me of The Graduate, by the way.
Yeah, it's the same. It's been done a lot of times. I was thinking of cowboy movies, really. I was thinking like, it's like a gunfight, and she's saying, okay, ready, let's go, baby. Let's see what you can do, I like, in my mind, the guy is like, Paul Auster saw the film early on, a rough cut. He said, well, you're like a cowboy in the movie. I said, well, I basically thought of him as like a samurai, but he works in a flower shop. You know what I mean? It's like a guy who's very comfortable in his body. He's a confident guy, but he's not a cocky guy. And, he's a guy who actually likes the company of women. And I took out a lot of the background in the editing of it, because you can tell he liked his mother, but he never talks about his father. So there was a whole backstory that his father left his mother, he never came back. And I thought, I didn't really need it at this in the scene that it was in. We were almost past that point, because it was in the scene in the park with Vanessa. But there are men, who are comfortable with women and actually like the company of women. And I have a lot of women friends, and I had a very good, close relationship with my mother. I think I could always see my mother as a woman and not just as my mother. And I think that there's a big difference when you're able to do that.
Yeah. But also the fact that you just invoked the Western or the samurai, maybe it's because this afternoon I happen to be teaching the Western genre in my class at Columbia. One of the really important things to me is the code of honor.
Right.
Because in the really good classic Westerns, it's not just a guy who shoots. The violence has to have a reason, and the man has to know why he's doing it. What is the moral reason? And one of the things that I appreciated, Dr. Ruth was just backstage with us, and she was complimenting you on this, that there is something honorable about the character of Fioravante. He doesn't take advantage of women or situations.
No.
And I think, was that always...
Yeah, I always wanted that, because at the end, they fall in love, but he knows he can't be with her. So he has to kind of, but he's also helped her. And at the same time, he's without her, so he has Murray, that's who he has. But I thought that, and they kind of need each other. It's like a father and son relationship. But I did think of it that way. I didn't think of him as a person who would take advantage. He was in the moment, and I think, you can meet people in your life that you can be very, very, affected by, and he is by her. And I think he is a little morally conflicted. He says it to Woody, it dilutes it. This whole thing, taking money, I don't feel really good about it. And Woody trying to tell him, like, you're helping people, you know what I mean? And it's like a butcher, that's what I was saying. So that was my idea, But, in a sense, Woody's right, because you do get used to what you're doing sometimes.
Right.
You say, okay, this is what I do,
Now,
but Dr. Ruth was happy that he lost the erection during the threesome.
Yes.
So I think, so I'm very happy that she was happy about it, because, if it was up to my financiers, that scene would have gone on for 2 hours, They were like, well, the film's about a menage, right? I was like, no, I mean, it's part of the movie, but,
Well, you started to have a little Freudian slip just now, film about a massage.
Yeah.
Because actually, the way I think of this film and why it works for me as well as it does is that it is about a massage.
Well, it's about
literally
touch.
and figuratively, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about the unceasing sort of need that people have to be touched, to have a human connection in the darkness of the night. There's not a person alive that doesn't want a shoulder to be able to hold or to grab onto. And that starts in puberty and it ends when you expire. And that's something that interests me. So.
And what better medium than film to actually depict that? You have these wonderful scenes, whether you're touching an old book at the beginning, or kneading bread, or touching flowers, or Mark pointed out when we were watching this time that right after Avigal cries that she's never been touched before, the close-up is of the hand coming down the staircase. Was this all in the script, or was it when you were shooting that you realized?
I like hands. I think hands and backs are not used enough. Close-ups are so overused. If you look at a person like Bresson, you look at his films, they're so powerful because it's about the people's bodies a lot of the times. And this is about a guy who's in his body, who can fix things, who can do things. And he's not an ambitious person. He's not shy, he's just quiet. So I thought that's really, it's really important that everything means something, that it all adds up. And in films about sex, you have to have an obstacle. So for her to just lay there, she's like a deer in that situation. And, when we did that scene, it was really, you almost felt like, should we be filming this? Because Vanessa was so vulnerable in the scene. And, it basically, after that, the movie changes. It changes.
Well, it becomes to some extent her story as well as the
right.
story of the guys who are in this new venture, and that enriches it. In terms of the other casting, was it particularly intimidating directing 3 directors? Because besides Woody Allen, you had Liev Schreiber, who is an actor and director, and Bob Balaban as the lawyer.
No, they were all fine. I mean, I had to deal with Woody, so after Woody, no. And Liev is, I thought Liev would be great because I thought he has a wide face. Most actors have much thinner faces than Liev, and when you put the payasses on them, they just don't look attractive. He looks like a lion.
Yeah.
He looks like a lion with it.
By the way,
he actually looks, maybe I prefer him that way, so actually, but I thought it'd be nice to see him because he's a very smart guy, to be in sort of a tender, slow part, and he really embraced that, and he brings like a dignity to it, and I thought, him against, he's very different than me and Woody. So no, I mean, I'm not, that I had Woody there that I had to tell him what to do, that was enough, and, sometimes I would say, Woody, could you be a little more? And he was like, okay. But he was like a prince. He was so quick and so fast. He was him and Vanessa probably were the 2 easiest, fastest people. Because, a lot of actors have to figure out their way and stuff. But I'm a fan of Liev's, and I think he's a wonderful actor, and I'm really delighted that he's in the film. I think he does a beautiful job.
It's so apt that you said he looks like a lion because his name, Liev, means lion.
Yeah.
And he's, you know.
Oh, he looks like a lion in the movie. And I love the way he looks. And I mean, one of the reasons, honestly, people ask me, well, why did you choose the Satmar, not the Lubavitcher? Because I met a lot of Lubavitcher. I said, listen, I'm Italian. I said, so hats are important to me, you know. I said, the Borsellino hats and the Lubavitcher, doesn't cut it for me. It just doesn't cut it. The Satmar have better hats, and that's why, and that was it. And those hats are important, just like the wig is important, you know. I mean, to find that wig for her really drove me crazy. And I went to the shop where they give all, you know, they sell all the wigs, and I told the lady, Shuli, her name is, in Borough Park, I said, please, Shuli, I said, give me your Rolls Royce wig. And she brought, I said, do you have a wig with highlights? And she said, oh yeah, I have something. And she brought it up. And of course, I loved it because it was like Joan of Arc and everything. And and Vanessa wasn't there. And it reminded me immediately of Julie Christie in Shampoo, which is a movie that had a little influence on this movie. And then I waited for Vanessa to come 3 weeks later. And when we put the wig on her, I said, wow. You know, we've really got something going here.
You just reminded me of something really bizarre.
Yes.
In the year 2000, I think it was, the National Arts Club honored you.
Right.
And among the speakers, you know, who gave testimonials were the Coen brothers.
Right.
And I think it was Joel Coen who said, it's always about hair. Yep. He said with Turturro, he says, each different film, you give him a completely different hairstyle, and that's what creates the character. Am I remembering this correctly?
But yes, I'm into hair, yes. I mean, also the payases could sink a film too if they're done badly. And usually they're done badly. Her wig, you can almost pass, for people who don't know about that, as her hair. So, and I also wanted it to be attractive and to be part of her. And that's why we built that coat almost like a corset. So it's like armor around her. And that's a silhouette. And, you know, I learned that stuff from working with, like, Francesco Rosi. You know, it's like the silhouette is everything. And Joel and Ethan are very much, you know, into that too. But, you know, Rosie, that's like a whole other level of silhouette. You know what I mean? And I've worked, you know, with a lot of, you know, wonderful designers. And you know how important that is, because it can really sink a movie because you're distracted by something like that.
Sure. One question, because it's not completely clear to me. The Variety review mentioned, which was very, very positive, mentioned that you may have cut something that explained that you had a girlfriend who was a singer.
Yeah.
And there is a scene where you go to this nightclub and there's a Tunisian singer.
Yeah, she's from Passione.
I know.
Mbarka Ben.
Yes, I recognize her from Passione.
She sings "I'm a Fool to Want You" in Arabic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, did you shoot a sequence
where
that was clear?
We had a scene, and, you know, because the relationship was so potent with Avigal, the other thing didn't work that well. Her singing worked really well, but she's not a, you know, experienced actress. And we could see that the movie was changing by, you know, someone's performance was changing it. And you have to be, you know, like Woody said, sometimes someone does one look and 3 pages go out the window. And that's how it is in a movie, you know.
Okay.
So.
The very beginning, too, I was curious, the opening credit sequence, it's shot differently, like a grainy
It's 8mm
movie. Was that supposed to be suggesting that this was being filmed the end of the shop? I mean...
Well, you know, I had 30 days of principal photography, which is not a lot to light something beautifully. I had 2 days of second unit. So I figured maybe if I do some stuff with 8mm, you'll get the idea of all these stores, you know, fading away, closing, these establishments that you know people in, that they're going away, so they have to sort of reinvent themselves out of that. And that just gave me a little more option, and I liked how it looked. So, you know, if I would have had another week of shooting, I probably could have done a lot of those shots on 35mm. You know, we shot the film on film. We didn't shoot on digital because we thought it was much more, it's a liquid medium and it's much softer on especially all the ladies' skins.
And in fact, I should mention something that not everybody in the audience will recognize, but your DP is Marco Pontecorvo.
That's right.
And he is the son of the great director Gigolo Pontecorvo, Gigolo, who made the Battle of Algiers.
Right. That's his son.
And he also shoots a lot for Game of Thrones, among other things.
Yeah.
He's Italian.
He was trained by Pasqualino De Santis, and he was the operator on La Tregua, the Truce, the Primo Levi film. And Pasqualino trained him. Pasqualino worked with Visconti, Zeffirelli, Rosi, Bresson, and so he was trained by a master. He was also the camera operator for Gianni Di Venzano, who did 8.5 and La Dolce Vita, and he died, and Marco took over, and we became very close friends. He died, we were together, me, Marco, and Pasqualino, and so I've done a short of his that he directed. He's directed things. He did Passione with me, and he's wonderful. You know, his father was Jewish. You know, his mother's Catholic. You know, and so he's a beautiful person, and he's a wonderful. We really get along really well, and he's one of these DPs who actually looks at people's faces, and he lights, their faces. And I think he did a beautiful job within a very short amount of time that we had.
No, and it's also, for me, such a New York film. I mean, I really believe that I'm seeing the neighborhoods, the textures, but that European sensibility that an Italian DP can bring in the way that it almost caresses the faces.
That's right.
You know, the film almost feels quintessentially New York and could be part of a European sensibility.
Well, New York sort of, is that too in many ways. We're a city, we're a port city, and so, and I also feel kind of, stuck in between sometimes. Just, when you bring your own sensibility to something, you don't really realize what it is until you do it. I looked at Morandi paintings for the walls that were painted, in Fioravante's apartment. I looked at Saul Leader photographs that were street photographs. And so, we drew on all those sources. And I think it was a really nice collaboration. It was a very kind of Italian, Jewish collaboration, it was. It really was. It was,
listen, how appropriate at the end. Dovey asks Fioravante, are you Jewish?
That's an important line.
Oh, no.
Yes.
I mean,
I don't think he really means that. I think he really means, what happened? What did you do? Give me some tips. But, that's the only thing he can really say, And I think the other guy says to him, like, well, what can I say? I don't know, what the hell I am. I mean, I'm half Sicilian. So I could be like 15 different things. Right. And that's the truth. Sure. That is the truth. People think they know what that is. They have no idea.
Well, let's just say from my perspective, having seen not all but a good chunk of your work, for a ostensibly non-Jewish actor, you have played more Jewish characters more persuasively than any actor I can think of.
I follow in the tradition of Edward G. Robinson, who played a lot of Italian characters, and he was also one of my favorite actors.
Yeah.
I mean that. When we saw him in House of Strangers when he was a kid, and he played Gino Minetti, he played the Italian patriarch, and he spoke Italian and sang opera. My parents loved him. They said he's perfect. Yeah. And, it doesn't really, it matters what your sensibility is. That's what it matters. And, it was really Joel and Ethan who started me in that, in that way. And then after that, I became the go-to guy for a lot of things. But I've played a lot of different groups, but I have played a lot of, yes.
Yeah, and very well, I think. At the end of the movie, Fioravante doesn't just leave. There's that wonderful moment, the card is given to the attractive French woman, which for me opened the door, I hope you don't mind my asking, to a possible sequel, because
well, it depends if the movie makes money. Then I could talk to Woody, and Woody would say, well, we could start in a coffee shop. But I think that song, Canadian Sunset, there's something in the music is about the possibilities of renewal or reinvention. It's right in the song. It's like in the melody of the song. And I thought that was the right ending. Of course, once again, the people who gave us the money wanted Fioravante and Alvagal. And I was saying, well, she has 6 kids. I said, and he has 1 room. I don't think, I said, if she had no children, maybe they could see if they could get along, but so I had to, go back to my original ending, but I had to try it, for everybody. But but that's what I wrote.
Well, it's an open ending.
Yeah, it's open.
And
that's right.
a good thing. You mentioned just now, we talked Pontecorvo and Edward G. Robinson. I feel the inspiration of other directors, not just in this film, but some of your other work. Could you tell us, I'm guessing that Truffaut is in there, somebody whose work has been very important to me. Maybe Jean Renoir. Who are some of the directors whose work has inspired you?
I love, directors who can, when they have, when like someone like Jean Renoir, some of his films are so, he made some masterpieces, but they're so, it's like commedia dell'arte, and that they're so deep. They're so deep. There's this humanity in this life, and I think I've done Chekhov, and that's something I aspire to. I'm very interested in, like the human comedy, which can have a gigantic depth that can actually supersede like just a pure drama. But obviously. And Fellini has that in some of his movies, like Nights of Cabiria, which is a favorite movie of mine. But in this movie, I looked at all kinds of things for color, for sex scenes, for, I looked at a Bergman film, The Silence, because I think his movies, they're just so incredibly sensual, his films. Everyone's beautiful, but the photography, there's something that he's able to do that very few people have been able to do when it comes to sensuality. I looked at some Mitsuguchi films because he's made a lot of films about this world, because I think he also used to frequent that world a lot too. And so, it depends. I'm an old movie buff, and there's films I just enjoy watching again and again, from Shoot the Piano Player to Rocco and His Brothers, you know what I mean? So I can go on and on. So, but in the end, you got to be careful that you let things kind of pervade into you, but you don't try to replicate it, because whenever you do, it fails. It usually fails, because it's not like you're not dealing with your own urge and your own instinct and then trying to design around that. And a couple times I tried to, and I cut it out. I cut it out,
Well, when you mention having appreciated directors who can depict sensuality on screen, I think that's another way of acknowledging directors who love women and who are able to depict female experience, even if it's from the male perspective.
Right.
And that leads me to what may seem like a bizarre question, because I sat down in preparing for tonight and I looked at the filmography, trying to remember what are my favorite roles of yours, and knowing that we couldn't fit all that much into the little clip reel. And it seemed like a coincidence, but my favorite performances of yours seem to be in films directed by women, which are not probably as well known to this audience. I'm just going to mention a few. 13 Conversations About One Thing, which was directed by Jill Sprecher. The Lusian Defense, directed by Marlene Goris. The Man Who Cried, which Sally Potter directed with John Turturro and Johnny Depp. Alison Anders, Grace of My Heart, is a fantastic film. And you've worked with more female directors than most actors I've interviewed. Can you talk a little about what that might have?
Well, I wish I could work with more, honestly. I like working with women. I like working with opposite women and with women as designers or directors. And the male directors that I like, I think, have kind of a gentle, more feminine side, to them. I don't like, army type directors. I don't respond to that, and it brings out the worst in me. So I think, there's just something different there, and that doesn't mean sometimes they can be bullish too, but I think it's a different kind of transaction that goes on, and there's less sometimes ego, and I just enjoy working with women, and it's when I have to try to write a woman's role, I'm working with an actress. I know, listen, I'm not a woman, but I've been a son, I've been a husband, I'm a friend, I was a student of, certain teachers that had a big effect on me and really I was very close to. So, you know, it's something, when the opportunity arises, I usually, you know, I'm interested in it.
But lest I give the impression that John Turturro is merely the darling of indie filmmakers seeking out the low-budget projects, I mean, you Transformers and Mr. Deeds, and one of my favorites, believe it or not, guilty pleasure, Don't Mess with the Zohan, this Adam Sandler film, and Anger Man. You do Hollywood films too.
Well, I
right?
mean, I didn't for a long time until sort of the medium-sized films started shrinking. I think the first real, I turned so many of them down over the years, but Adam I knew from Saturday Night Live, which I hosted, and he asked me to do Mr. Deeds, and I said, I don't want to play a big role, I said, but I like these 2 little parts, and if you make them one, and you let me design my own wig, once again, and accent, I said, I have an idea, you know, it's something I would like to do. And they let me do what I wanted to do, and I had a lovely time doing that with them. And then, you know, he asked me to do the anger management, and I did because he had told Jack Nicholson that I was going to be in it. And when I said I couldn't be in it, he said, you know, Jack Nicholson's really depending on you. And I was like, all right. So he kind of talked me into that. But the Zohan was a passion thing for him. And I do think the first part of that is very, very funny. And then it kind of, you know, falls apart a little bit. But I thought he was really good in that first part. And they cut my scenes in, you know, in Arabic. So I was, you know, you learn all this, you know, different language. And then they say, no, I said, well, you can subtitle it. But in a studio film, nobody can read. So you learn that. And then the Transformers things, that was like my son's, you know, one of my older sons, he said, listen, Amadeo, he said, listen, you don't read it, just do it for us, just do one. And I did it. And, you know, I don't mind doing it. I try to do, it's like a sketch. You know, other things are like a painting, and that's like a really, try to do a good sketch, and I try to do as good a job as I can, but then I have to recover when it's over. I do, I have to recover. Because it's a lot of explosions and a lot of testosterone, and you know, and Michael. I base my characters on Michael Bay when I work with Michael Bay, because he's really out there. But I like him. I like him. You know, but we're like very different. So
I can imagine.
Yeah.
He makes. I mean, your entire budget for Fading Gigolo is probably one day on a Michael Bay film. Yeah. So.
I mean, it's like another profession. It's you know, my father used to say he was a builder, and my uncles were carpenters, and you know, there was like commercial work and custom work. There was a custom job, and I do my custom work, you know, but that's like another profession. It's like I do electrical, but I'm really a plumber. You know what I mean? So, you know what I mean?
As we heard in the film.
That's right. And that's the truth. It's like plumbing is, you know, you got to get in there and take everything apart. Electrical is wire. It's not that hard. It's not that hard.
Okay.
I mean, if you put the wrong wires together, you have a fire. But beyond that, it's okay.
Yeah, I have a lot more questions, but I know that some of you do too. So we're going to raise the lights a little bit so that we can see you better. And then we can take a few, as soon as my eyes adjust, we can take a few from here. And then, okay, I see a gentleman here and then one behind.
Oh, Mr. Turturro, I thought you were so good in The Irresistible Rise of Arturo Ui. If you could direct yourself in a film adaptation of a classic play, which play would you pick and what character would you like to play?
If you could direct yourself in a film adaptation of a classic play, which character would you play? And this is based on a compliment for his work in The Irresistible Rise of Arturo Ui.
I don't know. I did The Cherry Orchard a few years ago. I played Lopakin, and I loved that play. And they've made movies of it. Most plays don't work as movies. That's the problem. And, you know, they just don't. It stays inert. But I love Chekhov, so maybe something in Chekhov. So that's all I could say. Okay.
Gentleman here and then the woman there.
Just wondering how important when you direct a film is the rehearsal process. Did you do a lot of rehearsal with the scenes with Woody?
Well, with Woody and
I'm just going to repeat it. How important is the rehearsal process? Did you have much of a rehearsal with Woody Allen especially?
Well, I spent 2 years talking to him about it. And, you know, that really helps. That really helps. And the first day, you just want to make sure everyone knows their lines. with Vanessa, we went over things, and she spent time in the community, and that was helpful. But sometimes you don't get that chance. What I like to do is spend time with people and get to know them to see who I'm working with. And you can rehearse all different ways. It doesn't have to be on the script. It can be through fittings, it can be through listening to music, it can be through a lot of things. But it's nice to, certain movies like Romance and Cigarettes, I did have a long rehearsal period because we had to with the music and the dancing and everything like that. But it is nice to know who you're working with because you never know who's going to show up that day and how long they're going to take to get in front of that camera. So, but the more you know someone, the easier it is because you're under a high pressurized, time limit.
Okay, there was a woman right there, and then back here and here.
Yeah.
It seems like she shares something very deep in the film that she hasn't touched before.
Right.
So what was your decision behind not having your character share something, or maybe he does share something?
If I heard correctly, could you talk about, since Avigal reveals about herself that she's never been touched before, why there isn't a commensurate revelation on the part of Fioravante to her?
I had it about his father, and I felt we were almost beyond that we didn't need it at that time. I think he tries to say something and she cuts him off. And I thought that would be more interesting than him saying, he doesn't really trust in the longevity of romance because it was said in a very different way because his father walked out on his mother and he never saw him again, And I felt like you could see that they were crazy about each other. It was obvious. And so he goes to say something and she says, shh, you don't have to say anything. She said, you see who I am. And that's enough for me. And I think that's a very big thing in life. And I think she sees that but he's a type of person who probably doesn't share things easily. And I think that can be true to life. Sometimes you know someone for 30 years, and then they tell you, I have a wooden leg, and I'm just, really I didn't know that. But you know what I mean? Like you can be, I'm just using that as a metaphor, but it is true that way sometimes.
I forgot there was one there and then down here, yes.
What sort of research did you conduct as far as social conventions in contemporary Hasidim, and particularly the roles and expectations of women?
Could you talk about the specific research that you did in terms of the Hasidim, especially the expectations of women?
Well,
the roles of women.
I met, women in that community who let me, in their house, who were, living in that community, grandmother, mother, daughter. I met a lot of different people, and I met a lot of people who left too. I read different books, but I was particularly interested in the women who were conflicted about the lifestyle, because I thought that would help me understand this woman who's sort of in between. And I met lots of people from the Lubavitcher community too. And then, I looked at all documentaries, but it was really the people I met. And especially through this one group, it's called Shulent. That's the word, it's that dish. Shalit, okay. And that's the name of the organization. And I met a lot of people, and I would go there, and it would go on all night. And then from that, I met different people. I went to some different, holiday, Sukkot, meals and stuff like that. And then I met some people, and those are the people I really did a lot of my research on. And, and one woman in particular, and her girlfriend, both of them. So, I was interested in the whole reading aspect of it. How people have to stop their education, how they would hide their books. And I had read this book about, the history of women reading, that the first women who ever read, once the printing press was established, were educated nuns, not the field worker nuns, but the educated ones. And there was, a very big movement amongst the educated men at the time that they didn't want women to read. They didn't want women to be allowed to read, because then they would get various ideas. And I thought, wow, this is really, exactly what I'm interested in. And reading means a lot to me just as a person, and that you can't read is something I think is very strong. So that was something I tried to put in the film, in little ways. I'm not an expert, but I spent a lot of time, and it made me interested and not dismissive either, because I think there's two sides to that story. And I tried to actually present that in some ways.
Right here.
Hi. So when building a New York movie, what influenced you to choose the Upper East Side and the candy shop as the central?
I lived on the Upper East Side. I chose the Upper East Side because I used to live on 73rd between 1st and 2nd. And my friend Herb White's, he had a bookstore, right around here. And I had a little apartment, and I looked all over, and we found an apartment. I fell in love with that apartment. That's on like 80th or 82nd, right off of Lexington. And luckily, we could cut out the wall in the other apartment. It was empty, so we could shoot, because it was so small. All the locations I chose were so small that drove my cinematographer crazy. But these are the things that exist. And then we, of course, painted everything. But that's why I chose it, because this is the world and I used to imagine myself as a gigolo on the Upper East Side when I was a bartender. I used to work on the right bank on 68th and Madison. And I used to, meet my friend Michael Bottalucco all the time when we would go to Cinema 1, 2, and 3 and the Baronet and the Coronet. We'd always meet at Bloomingdale's in the lingerie department. And I was thrown out of there one day. They said, "What do? You never buy women's underwear?" I said, "Yes, but I like it." So, that's why I'm here to meet my friend. But I was a young guy, and I used to also serve all these rich people. They would come for their daily, it was a bistro. And I would imagine that I would have this other life. So, yeah.
Wow.
So I still imagine it.
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Ruth. In addition to the fact that I appreciate you did not sleep with the Orthodox woman.
Right.
It is violent. And I was very pleased to see that you showed the pressure of the society in which these people live and the control, but without violence. Nobody got hurt, nobody had a bloody nose.
Yeah.
Because I was worried in the car that there would be some violence.
Right.
I'm just going to repeat in case people didn't hear in the back.
Thank you.
Dr. Ruth, on a serious note, was saying that she appreciates that the film did not resort to showing violence, especially within that community where there could have been some repercussion for behavior that goes against the norm. But instead of, for example, something violent happening even with Murray in the car with the Satmars, you're aware of the control, but nobody gets bloodied. There isn't anything of that kind.
Well, the whole idea is that there's a threat and there's pressure, and I felt that that's enough. And someone who's grown up around some violence, I really don't. I don't need to see it all the time. I think sometimes to try to see something without that, opens your mind up in a different way. It's an easy thing to do. So thank you.
There was a question here.
Yeah, I love the movie tonight, but I wanted to tell you that your performance in Quiz Show was
Oh, thank you.
She said, "I love the movie tonight, but want to tell you that your performance in Quiz Show was mesmerizing."
Thanks. I had a lot to work with. It was based on a real guy, so I got to credit him.
I wanted to know if you enjoyed working with Redford.
Oh, I loved working with Redford, with Robert. I loved working with him. He's so handsome, first of all, and very affectionate. Yes, he was always hugging me, and No, we had a very wonderful relationship on that film. I was a really a lovely, creative experience.
And I dare say that Redford might be, a kind of model for what you became, namely a successful actor who suddenly decides to become a director. First was Ordinary People, and I think this show was only his second feature.
Third. The River
runs through it. Sorry.
Right.
And was that the second one?
Yeah.
I apologize. Thank you. Milagro Beanfield War was the second one. But you too, you finally decided in the early 90s that Mac would be your first feature, and then you have managed to, do 5 altogether.
Right.
And Passione, I just want to recommend very clearly to anyone here who has not seen it. I was stunned when I saw Passione because I walked in thinking, do I really want to see a documentary about the music of Naples, the songs of Naples? I don't know anything about it. But the absolutely contagious passion that you demonstrate in front of the camera and behind it for this vital music, I suddenly became a fan of that music, but also of your ability to document something with great love.
I tried to, it's kind of great to take a cliche and open it up, and just say, okay, let's see what's really there. And I really love that city, and I love the people a lot.
It comes through. We have time for one or two. I see somebody there, and then the woman who's waving in the middle. So first here.
Thanks, Harry. Well, you can spend money to see it.
Somebody got left me a ticket, but it was a good time.
Thanks.
Fortune. The adjective. Fortune, man. It was just fun. I enjoyed it. Smart people can see it and come away having had a good time.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, all around in the world.
Okay.
By the way, I've been directed by him. He's a very nice boy.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you. Woman there. Could you share what you might be doing next?
I have a bunch of movies coming out, that I acted in. I just made a movie in Italian with Nanni Moretti, and I did a biblical film, which Woody couldn't believe, with Ridley Scott,
called Exodus.
Yes, another film that's about the same subject matter. And I have a film that I made with Philip Seymour Hoffman that unfortunately, and that's coming out, that John Slattery directed. But I hope to...
It's called God's Pocket,
God's
and it
Pocket.
opens May 9th.
Right. And so I've done a couple other movies, smaller roles, except the Nanni Moretti. And I may do something in the fall for HBO, one of those limited things. But I have another script. I've optioned and developed an old French movie from the 70s that I loved, that had a big effect on me, and I wrote to the director. It's a book and a movie, and I said, what would you think if I would do my own adaptation? There was a book that has a very good American translation, but it was a film that I loved by Bertrand Blier. And,
which one?
And he thought he was very amused that I was interested in it, but it had a big effect on my life. So I hope to make an American version of Going Places.
Going Places, oh my goodness.
Yeah,
that was one of my favorite films at that time. It starred Gérard Depardieu
and
Patrick Devers,
yeah,
right?
And Miu Miu and Jean Moreau.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a really wild movie, and there's something about it that I really love, so we'll see.
Wow.
Yeah.
And didn't you also participate in Rio?
Yeah, I did in the anthology film I Love Rio, where there's 10 different directors, and I did a two-hander with Vanessa based on one of her songs from her new album, Love Songs, because I wanted to work with her again and just see if we could do something completely different. And I'm really fascinated by her, and I find her really like a muse in a way.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Oh dear. Well, we would love to ask you more questions, but I will end with two things. First, that this film opens tomorrow, and please tell your friends it's at the Angelica, Lincoln Plaza, Cinema 123. And And just one last word that, I just want to say, as a woman, how much I appreciate that you've made a film that focuses on a man's ability to listen to a woman, to look at a woman, to really hear her and see her and touch her, as opposed to exploit her, use her, which we see so often. And in addition to being a great director, what a good man you are. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.